we appreciate you being here. Forrest, if you can go ahead and drop the sign in the chat. Let us know you are here with us so we can make sure that we communicate with you in the future and ensure that you know what's going on with BRAYN. So today we are going to get grounded, then have our BRAYN coffee shop. We'll have our speaker Cheruba Chavez, and then a speaker Q&A. From there, we'll have our BRAYN announcements and a special community announcement, as well as announcements from our members. And then we'll say goodbye for now. Now we will turn it over to Lauren, who is a part of the convening working group and the Big Buddy leadership team, to affirm the organization.
So at the start of our meeting, we always want to affirm the organization. BRAYN is a network for youth organizations that provide one or more of the following: after-school youth programming, summer youth programs, and wraparound support services for youth. BRAYN's goals are to build the youth services field to improve how communities and schools work together to create more equitable outcomes for youth in the long term, and also to increase youth engagement and high quality out of school opportunities. So our principles of practice: community. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that was said by Nelson Mandela. The quality of our relationships and trust matter. So move at the speed of trust. And then collaboration. We can fight for the scraps that fall off the table, or we can build a bigger table together. And collaboration builds the table. And lastly, consensus. This process requires us to slow down, take time to build shared understanding, and value equity in decision-making.
Thank you, Lauren. At this time, we are going to participate in the BRAYN coffee shop, where we break out into breakout rooms and discuss questions associated with the topic. Today's statements, analysis is do a self-assess your organization's language access or language justice processes. The facilitators will explain and give examples of what this means. Also, self-assess your practices that affirm or don't affirm the immigrant experience. Forrest Middlebrook, who is also a convening working group member and works for the Baton Rouge Youth Coalition, will start putting you all in breakout rooms. All right. So thank you all for participating in the BRAYN coffee shop. And if we can just have one of the facilitators give us a quick overview of what you discussed. Dr. Harrison, do you want to go first?
Okay, I can go first. Well, we're glad that the Louisiana, the new museum, Children's Museum, not children's, science. Yes, right. She told us about a new resource that they're using, and it's the National NISE net. But anyway, it translates into Spanish, and so it's a good resource for those organizations that are small and might not have like a real translator, and they can use that as a resource. So that's good to know. And also, I mentioned the Guardian Initiative. Because of our large Spanish-speaking population, that we do have a staff person, and there's a need. And also, the Science Museum has hard of hearing, because that was also mentioned as another group.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Harrison. And just so you all know, this goes into a document. It will be part of the recap from this meeting. So if you didn't get all of the information, you will definitely have access to it. And Courtney, I caught you. Courtney, are you ready to share?
Yes, ma'am.
Great, thank you.
We talked about some good stuff. We did have a lot of questions in our group. The first thing, Josh from the Y, they do bilingual flyers. That's amazing. The Girl Scouts, they do bilingual flyers, as well as provide some services bilingually to all the young scouts. We also have different things. A part of Big Buddy, we did employ a translator, so we're very excited about that. But a lot of questions that we had is just how to kind of employ more translators and engage in that type of community. Just more resources and services to keep engaging our students and population, because we're noticing a heavily increase, especially in the Hispanic areas. Documentation, just kind of like the best practices and methods, and getting more of that question, just what is the best networks and who can we connect with to really help us fill in those gaps as well. And then of course, Dr. Harrison came up quite often as the go-to person for us.
Woo-wee. But I see that website is in the chat that I was mentioning. Thank you.
Yes, it is in the chat. Okay, well, Courtney, that's a great segue to our keynote speaker today. She is Cheruba Chavez, the education diagnostician and assistant director of English learner supports for the New Orleans Public Schools. And so she is going to share with us, you know, where those resources are and some other information. She has been an English teacher in English as a second language and special education across K through 12. Cheruba designed and executed programs that demanded a high standard of achievement and yielded exceptional academic and language acquisitions standards of achievement. Growth outcomes for her students, with an unwavering belief that schools must be answerable to families and provide a quality education for all children. Cheruba takes initiative to support school accountability by providing professional development for teachers, advocating for equitable policy to support immigrant students, and counseling families in their rights in both special education and language justice. Cheruba uniquely specializes in the intersection of students who identify both as English learners and as eligible for special education services, and is also the co-founder of the EXCELL Coalition, which seeks to expand graduation criteria for recently arrived immigrant students in Louisiana. Cheruba holds bachelor's and master's degrees from Tulane University and completed her educational diagnostician training at Northwestern State University of Louisiana. Cheruba lives with her husband and two beautiful children and is proud to call New Orleans home. Cheruba, thank you so much for joining us. And
Good morning. Good morning. So happy to be here and just like amongst like-minded people that's like doing this good work every day. I'm zooming in from New Orleans, so I don't know what y'all talking about working through Mardi Gras week. Like we are going all out here. I was just at my son's school. They're doing this little parade around his Head Start Center and we're doing all the things. So we are deep in Mardi Gras season. But really grateful to be here. And are y'all able to see my screen? Yep, great. And talking about this important and growing population of immigrant students that are in our city. I'm definitely in a New Orleans context, very, very different from Baton Rouge, especially as far as schools go. But I'm really hoping that you all have some tangible takeaways to bring back as you continue to service students and families. Just looking at this, right, we know that a lot of our immigrant students are coming right now from Central America, right? Honduras, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Salvador. But instead of thinking about our kids, right, and our families as a monolith, what are some concepts of deep culture, and feel free to just like unmute yourself and shout it out, that maybe you hadn't thought of before? Right, so
I had not thought of, I had not thought about the food differences until, like say from Mexico and one Honduras.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
the way that, for instance, the way that Honduras make tacos entirely different from the way that we make them.
Mm-hmm. And going past, right, that surface, that external like expressions of culture, right? What are some indicators of deep culture that we might, want to challenge ourselves and ask about, right? And align ourselves with as we're servicing families from different experiences.
I'll
Some of the
go.
indicators of deep culture.
An issue that I ran into just being out in the community was with one of my neighbors trying to get his prescription from the local pharmacy, and the pharmacist not recognizing the difference between the name on his ID card and the name for the prescription, because it didn't include his mother's surname, and how those naming conventions with the additional names can be very confusing on government documents or with ID verification. And so there being a language barrier there, but also a cultural barrier there, and the pharmacist not recognizing that this was the same person. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good concrete example of how, right, it's not just language, it's deep cultural differences that we have to acknowledge. Let's do one more.
Yeah, I would like to. Speaking of that, also the way that the dates are, if you ask for the birth date, and then they will give the day first and then the month and then the year. And so that can also be confusing.
Absolutely, right. Another concrete way that we have to like make sure we acknowledge differences in deep culture while we're trying to communicate and serve families. I always joke, right, with my husband that anytime we're like having something at the house or like throwing a party and inviting people over, we have to give like every group of people a different time when we're starting, because everyone has a different like understanding of what time means, right? Like if they're telling me 2 o'clock, I'm showing up at 4 kind of thing. So, right, just like, again, keeping these deep indicators in mind, right, as we're serving families, right, attitudes towards adolescents' role in the family, right, attitudes towards authority, right, notions of, right, a teacher's role, right, versus a family's role in a child's education, those sort of things, right, come into play, and like these ladies have mentioned, can come up with some really concrete ways that we need to bridge that gap in serving families. Jasmine already introduced me. Probably my best favorite role is being a mama of 2. I am a teacher by background, did some diagnostician work with the district, and now I'm really grateful to have stepped into this role, doing English learner support at NOLA PS. And today, just like a quick agenda, because I'm one of those people that's like needs to like know where the next 30 minutes is going. Talking about engaging families, right? Educating students. And then Jasmine did mention the EXCELL Coalition. So talking about the proposal that we'll be bringing to BESI next month around graduation criteria. So we know, right, that this is a super growing population. So this is just English learner rates, right? So this is, again, just looking at our students that are enrolled in school, grown 4%, right? We're now at like 4.5% statewide. But I think we know that, in pockets of Orleans, Jefferson, Baton Rouge, right, we have a deeper concentration of our students. Baton Rouge actually just passed New Orleans up, now at, I want to say 8.59% English learner. New Orleans is at 8. Jefferson is 20%. 1/5 of their students are English learners. But also keeping in mind that English learner is not synonymous with families who are limited English proficient. English learner is a soft label. So once a student tests proficient in English, they have a test that they take annually. Once they test out, right, they're no longer classified as an English learner. So this does not include students who were formerly English learners, right? And this is not indicative of students who are from families who might have a language other than English at home, right? So you might have a lot of kids in your system who are not English learners, but their families are still speaking a different language at home. So, you know, obviously we've had this really big influx of students coming here around 2014, 2015. And, you know, at first, right, we know that a lot of families were, a lot of men, right, especially after Katrina, were coming. There was work opportunity here to rebuild after the storm. But soon after that, right, they started bringing their wives, their children, as economic and political instability just, you know, exploded in their home countries, right? And so now a lot of the families coming here, you know, fall under the categories of people seeking asylum or, you know, their cases on refugee status. 2017, actually, New Orleans was the fastest growing foreign population in the entire US. And we know that it's not just concentrated in our cities like it used to be. Quickly growing pockets of immigrants in Lafayette Parish, right? North Louisiana, St. Tammany, St. Bernard. And who is coming here now, right? So we mentioned, right, student, children and moms coming. But in the past, right, 10 years, Jefferson Parish actually was 14th in the entire country for receiving unaccompanied minors, right? So we've seen an influx of students, adolescents coming by themselves, being held at detainment centers at the border, and being released to a sponsor family, right? So a lot of these students coming here don't know who they're going to be living with, right? It's not the people that they've grown up with. There might even be some animosity there, right? The person they're moving with might have been somebody they felt abandoned them many years ago. So thinking about all of these experiences, right, as we're serving these kids and families. We're noticing now that a lot of the older students, right, teenagers that are coming have had interrupted formal education, right, because of the economic and political instability at home. So when we talk about translating things, right, especially thinking about like school-based in the classroom, a lot of times our older students are not literate in first language, right? So even just translating something is not a help to them, right? If anything, it makes them feel worse, like, wow, my teacher's trying to help me and I can't even, right, understand this in my own language. But then we notice a lot of our younger students, right, were born here. So it's estimated that over 50% of the students in elementary were actually born in the US. So thinking about the differences, right, and the nuances in the population that we're serving. Was really excited to hear conversation earlier today about language access, right? So there is, and I'll send this PowerPoint to Jasmine. These links will be live, so hopefully you can tap into these resources. USDOE and DOJ did release some joint guidance for schools, particularly on the language access rights of families. So things like has to be a certified, right, or trained interpreter. You can't have students translating for each other, right? You can't have family members translating, right, and putting them in that situation to communicate important information about a child. So if we look in the larger pink bubble, right, so like to be compliant, language access, right, we want to make sure that we have certified trained interpreters on call for every step of a process, of an intake, having those translated documents, right, and making sure that we either contract or have itinerant bilingual personnel floating between locations. That's like the compliance piece. But if we want to really serve families with excellence, we'll move into a space of language justice, right? I heard some of you all mentioning having people on staff who spoke, who were bilingual, multilingual, right? Having that familiar face when you go into a space like, oh, I know that person can communicate with me, right? Is so comforting instead of always just calling, right, the language line and like having a third party interpret. And just because something is translated, right, it doesn't mean that the family will understand, right? processes, systems are so different here in the US. So making sure that like, if they are signing off on something, that it is informed consent, right? That just because it's in Spanish, right? They're not just signing off on it, they're actually understanding what's being offered to them, what they're agreeing to, what they're sending their children to, whatever the situation is, right? And making sure we're having those consistent like people in the building that serve our families, that are trusted, and that honestly, like that is the biggest way that immigrant families like share with their community, who are the people to go to, like, oh, I know so-and-so works there, like when you go there, go ask for so-and-so, right? That's how word gets out about who is trusted in our community. Here's some resources for language justice. Sabancha Lenguas is a social justice collaborative that does video interpretation on Zoom. So Zoom does have a feature. There's a little globe at the bottom, and there could be 2 lines of languages going on simultaneously. For those meetings, they do event interpretation as well, where they pass out headsets, and families can put those on and listen in real time. NOLA does similar services. They have a wider range of language offering, 32. They also do phone interpretation as well, and video interpretation that's on demand. Language Line is probably the one that's most used at like hospitals, right? At government offices. It's fine, right? It's just super impersonal. I'll give you a personal anecdote. So I in August, right, we had a family friend send their daughter here, just came to the country. So we took her in. She was pregnant. She was, you know, in school doing her thing, right? Great student, had the baby in January. And then when we got to the hospital, like calling Language Line when like somebody's in labor, and then being like, my name is so-and-so, I'm interpreter number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you're HIPAA, like it was just not ideal, right? So like, again, like I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to invest in actually having people in your building, or having like a live presence, like what's our NOLA. Paraphrase is great for document translation. They are like, do all the privacy compliant requirements, right? If you type something into Google Translate, obviously it's not protected. So we want to make sure we're protecting, right, family identity in their information as well. Any questions here before I move? Well, I think we're saving questions for the end, right, Jasmine? Is that what? Okay. All right. Sorry, that's the teacher in me, y'all. Okay. And I know we have a variety of organizations here represented, so I'm hoping this is applicable. So that I've seen a shift for some organizations using things like categorical eligibility to qualify families for assistance. For example, like you can get rental assistance if you show proof that you have Medicaid, right, or that you receive SNAP. The problem with some of these policies, right, even with categorical eligibility, is families not even having access to those services in the first place, right? So when I mentioned to you the 16-year-old that's living with us, she was able to get pregnancy Medicaid, right? She had the baby January 2nd. And at the end of the month, they cut her Medicaid off. Her postpartum visits are not even covered, right? As soon as you have the baby, right? They say as soon as you drop the baby, they drop you. So even, right, things that are open to other families here, right? Like La Moms and the CHIP, like those programs are not open for immigrant students and families. Right, CCAP is another one where they require proof of residency, right, or citizenship to receive subsidized early childcare. SNAP, so SNAP is especially evil because let's say you have a family of 4, right, and the parents have just come here, right, they're immigrant parents, and maybe the kids were born here. They will have you as a household of 4, right? And the parents' income will count against the family receiving benefits, but they will only count you as a household of 2 to receive the benefits. So, right, like those kind of internal like nuances are really important to understand as we're like trying to widen the net for families we serve. Right, it was really hard during COVID when a lot of my close friends that were you know, working in those frontline industries, hospitality, you know, line cooks, those were the first jobs to go when the pandemic hit. But a lot of those people also couldn't benefit from unemployment, right? Not having a social security number. Everyone else around them was getting stimulus checks to help families out. They didn't get a dollar, right? So those thinking about expanding our net of social services and eligibility to include these families, right? Right, and then engagement in workforce, right? Labor protections, having access to banking and financial institutions, right? If you don't have work authorization here, you take what you can get, right? You're not going to have the pay stubs to prove income, right? You might not even have an amicable relationship with your employer to even ask for a letter to prove what you're making. People that do get work authorizations get ITINs, right, a tax ID number. But when it comes to, right, and they can open a bank account with that, but when it comes to loans, right, and thinking about, right, young entrepreneurs and people who want to start businesses and want that access to capital as well, they cannot tap into loans, right, or any of those other protections that are there with an ITIN, right? And it's especially cruel, I think, right? Like they give you that ITIN, they expect you to file your taxes. But if you yourself don't have a social, right, you can't get those tax benefits for yourself, like the refunds that come out. So it's very like one-sided, the benefits. Right, and then just like thinking about the safety, security, independence, right? And misinformation is also really, really big in our immigrant community, just because, right? We've talked about language access and information not coming from the source, right? So you all know here in Orleans Parish, we don't have public schools, we only have charter schools. But one thing NOLA PS does is centralized enrollment, right? So you do an application, you apply you rank top 10 schools where you want to go to. There was like churches out here, y'all, that like, we'll charge $50 and we'll do the application for you. Like people really taking advantage of like immigrant families not having access to the correct information. Of course, they didn't submit like the documents and the application correctly. And like parents were surprised when their kids didn't get a placement. Things like that. Another thing that's really, really important, especially for women, right, is to be able to earn their own income. And something that's very prohibitive to that is right, our early childhood systems not being accessible to families, right? So a lot of women, when they do have a young child, they feel like they have to sit out of the workforce, keep their baby at home, because they don't realize, right, that we have B3 seats, we have LA4 seats, right? Because CCAP isn't accessible, they think no seat is accessible. So making sure we are, even though we do have a very fragmented ECE system right now, letting family know which type of seats are accessible to them and that they don't have to, you know, do full pay seats. There are subsidized seats that they're eligible for. Right, and then just like, y'all, there is one DMV that I know about in the greater New Orleans area. It's this older lady, like Wayne Marrero. I'd be surprised if she hasn't retired yet. Like the only Spanish speaker I know that works at a DMV, right? Like even these institutions, right? And like municipal services are not accessible. Like paying your light bill, right? Paying your water bill, things like that. It's just such a lift. Things we take for granted is just such a lift on immigrant families. So anything we can do in our capacity to ease those burden on families, let's do it. All right. Feel like I spoke a lot. and I'm like not pausing for questions. So I hope y'all hanging with me.
Cheruba,
right.
if you want to ask for questions now, that's fine.
Okay, well, we're moving on to this section. So anything like on the last few slides that we've covered? Nothing yet? Okay, all right. Well, moving on to this piece. So sometimes I live in my like education bubble, so I had to like step back and like start from basic here, right? So this is the state definition of an English learner. We have acknowledged as a state, right, that by being an English learner, you are by default going to struggle in classrooms where the language of instruction is English. And right, we've also acknowledged that by being an English learner, you are not going to be able to meet achievement levels on state assessments, right? And we see this definition as accurate. English learners across the board are the lowest performing subgroup in everything, right? Like this is LEAP, right? But if you look at like strength of the diploma index, right? Course enrollment, right? AP, IB courses, always the lowest subgroup. But it makes sense, right? Because it's in the definition of being an English learner that you're going to struggle with these things. So English learners take an exam every year. They're the only subgroup that takes 2 state assessments every year. One is called the ELPT, and it measures their level of English proficiency every year. Schools are held accountable to this growth. So you can see here, right, these are the 5 levels of language proficiency emerging all the way to transitioning when they exit L status. This factors into schools' SPS formulas more than some school leaders I've found out realize. So one ELPT is weighted as 6 assessments towards the assessment index. So if you think about like 2 4th graders, right, your 4th grader who's an L weighs twice as much towards a school's score than a non-L, right? And then in the 9-12 space, that's true as well. So thinking about like these incentives are already in place for schools to be moving kids on English proficiency. This is the expectation that schools have to meet. So for kids who come into the country K-5, they have 5 years to become proficient in English. For kids who come here 6-12, they have 7 years, right? And we could see this trajectory table that that's used in schools' SPS formula. So how should schools do this, right? Schools should be providing an explicit language program, right? So this is passed down to us by the feds, right? This is also a state expectation, and again, incentivized by that SPS formula. Most schools stick strictly by the CBI model. So this is where kids are in the general education classes. Now, the pitfall I always see is like they just throw kids in the big class and like sink or swim, right? But it's actually a very intentional program where the content teacher has the training to be able to teach content and language at the same time, right? Some schools, right, provide ESL resource where they're pulling kids out for periods of the day to work on those language skills. This is especially needed, right? And especially when kids switch from that learn to read to learn, right, around 3rd grade. Because in a 6th grade class, like no one's teaching you how to read, right? How to write simple sentences. That language instruction needs to still explicitly happen because it's not happening in your 6th grade classes. And then there are newcomer programs. These are very like explicit entry and exit criteria, usually for 1 year because we don't want to segregate kids more than they need to be. And then these kids are in this newcomer program, self-contained 1 year. They receive intensive language instruction, right? They get some basic content in as well. But the goal is for them to exit with enough language to access their content courses, right? And this is especially needed in that 6-12 space, because when kids come to us that age, the language that's expected of them to read and write in a 10th grade classroom, right, in 11th grade US history is impossible, right? That's an impossible ask when you were just learning the language. So these, again, are the 3 main program types. Go ahead, just shout it out. Which one do you think takes the most resources? Which one takes the most resources to staff and program?
CBI.
CBI, okay. So this would take obviously like the most staff, right? Because it's everyone teaching in their content area. And maybe I just asked the question wrong, because the most resources is the newcomer program, right? Because you have to hire bilingual staff, right? It's a self-contained program, right? Not all schools have the resource to be able to provide this newcomer intensive program. There is a lot of things New Orleans does not get right in our fragmented, decentralized system of schools, because we are, because we are decentralized. There is no pooling of resources. We have an apartment complex by me. There are 3 third graders that live there, waiting on 3 different buses, going to 3 different parts of the city, because that's just how it is, right? So when I talk about inefficiency and like how ineffective resources can be spent, I feel like our schools maybe epitomize that. But one thing we do get right, is that our district acknowledges that certain students take more resources to educate. Here is a model that we use in New Orleans, and something I think this body of organizations can champion in Baton Rouge as well. So that, right, kids get the MFP money from the state, right? This year it was around $7,500 per student. That's all students, right? Not just Ls. Ls receive Title III money from the feds as well. Not a lot of money, right? About $130 a student. It's very, very minimal. But what New Orleans does that I think would be amazing if Baton Rouge can like set a precedent for doing this and doing this well. We use our local dollars, right? We leverage our local dollars and we allocate it based on student need using a differentiated funding formula. So this is the current formula, right? We vote on this every 3 years. So if you can see here, right, the local dollars are allocated as a percentage of MFP. So K-8 high school base, right? They just get the MFP. But if you are an ELL tier 1, if you look at that chart, these are English learners in K2. These are English learners who have been here 3 years or more in 312. They get an extra 30% per child. ELL tier 2, 65%, right? So these kids have been in the country 3 years or less. These are kids in 3rd through 12th grade, 3 years or less. These kids get an extra 65% more funding. So this is how our parish has opted to use our local dollars, right? Because we know that all schools don't have an equal population of students with exceptionality. Students are L, right? Our kids are just kind of everywhere. We want the money to follow them so that they are serviced. So here's just like a summary of what that looks like for English learners in Orleans Parish, right? They get their Title III funds, DLFA tier 1, and then tier 2. So if you know anything about federal funds, right, and title money, high level of accountability of how schools spend this money, right? So if you are getting monitoring on Title III, right, you have to send sign-in sheets for PD, right, for English learners that was used to like train teachers how to teach English learners. You have to show receipts of things that you have bought that are things you bought with that money that are helping English learners. It is a very high level of accountability for those little $130 a student. Now, because of how We have a decentralized system of schools here in Orleans Parish. That $2,500, that $5,500 per student, we cannot tell schools how to spend that money. We cannot tell schools to spend that money on English learners. We give it to them for each English learner they have, but it just rolls into their general fund. We can't tell them how to use those dollars, and we can't demand any results. Baton Rouge is obviously set up differently. Y'all have a traditional district. You all have the opportunity here, right? If you were to adopt a differentiated funding formula to make sure that resources flow towards the children that need it the most and demand excellence, right? With responsibility, or with privilege comes responsibility, right? And so with those resources, right, we're demanding, we're demanding, right, results for our students. Also thinking about post-secondary opportunities, right? The last part of definition of an English learner. If you are an English learner, you will have a challenge to participate in society. I'm thinking about our kids who are coming here 14, 15, 16, 17 years old with no English, right? These kids come here and really they come here to work, right? They come here because they have to pay for their immigration cases. They have to help support their family. They have to send money back home, right? So how can we make staying in school a responsible choice, right? And I know I don't have much time, and I'm going to talk about EXCELL very, very briefly at the end, but Louisiana has a 41% graduation rate for English learners. Pre-COVID, that was around 22% in Baton Rouge, around 35% in New Orleans, right? And these are some of the barriers that contribute to that, right? Kids come in, everything's in English, right? They're being asked to write at a 10th, 11th, 12th grade level. They don't have a word of English, right? So again, like investing in those newcomer programs, even having one that's centralized at one high school that other kids can bus to, right, is a great model to use to support these kids in year one, right? A lot of these kids, right, have to work, send money back home, right? This is where we have the opportunity to issue credits over the summer, right? Making sure that schools continue programming in the summer, issuing new credits in the summer, not just recovery credits, so kids can have a smaller workload during the year that allows them to still work and meet that family obligation, right? Sometimes we sell these kids a dream, right? Work hard, go to college, and you'll make it, right? College is not an option for most of our children. If you don't have a social security number, you cannot get Pell Grant. Some years ago, they made it a requirement as part of graduation to complete a FAFSA to graduate. So many of these kids, right, have to pull you on the side, miss, I can't fill this out, right? And the school has to submit a FAFSA waiver on behalf of these kids, right? The traditional pathways to success that we may sell our other kids, right, are not an option for our students, and our kids know that, right? So they're not going to buy into this narrative that a lot of schools are putting out there for them, and they're just going to go home and take care of their families. So we have opportunities here, right, like with the Jumpstart diploma, to allow kids to have more room in their schedule. So Jumpstart diploma only requires 2 science, 2 social studies, and allows more room in the schedule for kids to attend community college, right? Get in those trade programs while they're in high school, right? So the high school is paying for that, right? It is part of their high school curriculum, so that when they graduate, they already have a workforce credential in hand, right? There are so many opportunities here, right? And we know if we open the door for this, not only will it service our students who are immigrants, it's going to service all kids, right? Because all of our kids need these things. I know I only had 5 minutes, Jasmine. So this is really what I wanted to conclude with today. We won't do the student stories, but right? We have already acknowledged as a state that English learners by definition cannot meet the state's level of proficiency level, right, to achieve on those assessments. We've also acknowledged as a state that kids who come here 6-12 take 7 years to become proficient in English. But we are still requiring these kids to pass state exams for graduation. This is why we lose our kids, right? So these are pre-COVID numbers because that was the last year that we required kids to pass the assessment for graduation. We see that English learners are obviously the lowest subgroup when it comes to graduation rates as well. Does anyone know why that the graduation rate for students with exceptionalities increased so rapidly? In 2014, state Congress passed legislation saying that students with exceptionalities, if they fail the LEAP twice, they can complete a portfolio project instead to graduate. And we see the doors of opportunities, right? 22 points, right? That it opened for that population. English learners don't have an option like that. Louisiana, right? One of 8 states that still require a test score for graduation, but even these other states recognize that English learners need expanded criteria. So Florida and Texas, they still require students to pass an exam for graduation, but they have expanded their criteria for English learners, right? So Texas students who have been here 5 years or less can pass their course instead of passing the test for graduation, right? Florida, very similar. They have alternate means of showing content mastery that's divorced from that language demand. And I know, like, we could say a lot of subgroups, right? Passing that test is a barrier, but this is a barrier disproportionate to ELs. Look at that, like, jump, right, with the COVID waiver. So 2020, when COVID happened, 2021, kids did not have to pass the state exam for graduation. And we saw that eliminating that one variable had a disproportionate effect on the English learner population. There was no other population with that much of a jump. Let's look at Baton Rouge. Less than around 5-point jump, right? For total population, a 22-point jump for the English learner population. We eliminated one variable and look what it did for these kids. Right? Calcasieu, St. Bernard, right? High performing parish. And this is statewide, right? There is no other subgroup that eliminating this one variable open doors of opportunity like this for, right? And wait, y'all, slides are out of order. We saw this, right? We saw this across the state and we put our heads together with other organizations, right? Chambers of Commerce, Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, we've talked to BRAC, right? We've talked to JEDCO, we've talked to other orgs, like we need highly skilled people in our workforce and we don't have them, right? And we're losing them because of this test requirement. So putting all of, everyone's feedback together and everyone's thought together, we've come up with the EXCELL Graduation Pathway. This is still a proposal. But our proposal is this, right? Kids still sit for the test. They still pass their courses, they meet seat time requirements. But they could complete a portfolio project, right? Or they can meet those ELPT, right? Those English language proficiency standards that I showed you in that table to be eligible for graduation, right? We would only open this option for kids who come here 7th grade or later, because again, the state gives them 7 years to become proficient. If you come to us 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th grade, you don't have 7 years with us. And then schools are not even held accountable to English learners' achievement until their 3rd year in the country. but we're still denying kids who have come into the country within those first 3 years a diploma, right? So we just want this to be fair for our children. We know that this is going to have indirect effects, right? Instead of scheduling a student in English 1, English 2, they fail both exams, have to take them again, right? Instead of scheduling them in US history 3 times until they pass their exam, we can focus our time now to build their English proficiency, which is what's really going to carry them far after graduation, right? So as far as EXCELL, right, my ask for you today, and I could send all the links and some sample language when we're done, is to please email your BESI member in support of EXCELL, right? Ask your district office to write a letter of support. Orleans Parish passed a resolution of support. Calcasieu Parish, their superintendent and his cabinet wrote a letter of support. And I can also keep this group informed as to when BESI will be considering this in the future. And if you are, since you are in the area, right, coming to make public comment and support on behalf of our kids. We are presenting to BESI in committee on Tuesday, March 7th. We'll see where it goes from there, if they are even willing to consider it for further action. But we're hoping that, right, their eyes, ears, and hearts are opened to hearing the stories from this group of students and these kids that just want to participate in the workforce and community like everyone else. I don't know if we have any time for questions now.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and take 2 minutes for questions. Are there any questions?
Yeah.
For
I do
Cheruba?
want to make a comment. Thank you so much, Cheruba, for coming. Anna and I contacted Cheruba because we do have an exploratory group here in Baton Rouge because of this problem. Thank you for all of that information, but I do want to point out we are encouraging in the Gardier community, we're having problems keeping our high school students in high school because they don't see a future with a diploma. And so that's why we are looking at this exploratory group. Although we have the diploma, the 2-year with the like the 2-year college, they still have problems with employment because they don't have a social security number, but at least they will have the skills. And I'm really appreciative of that. But, you know, with young people, it's hard for them to see beyond that. So thank you for all of the information.
Yeah, and I think what we can do, if you are thinking about your questions, you can put them in the chat. I'll save the chat and I can
Right.
send them to Cheruba, and in the recap, I can do, you know, a document where you'll have answers to your questions there.
And I want to mention one other thing. As a result of that exploratory group, Tara High School principal is amenable to a pilot program for newcomers, so that 9th grade newcomers would have access to extended English classes, as was mentioned in the newcomers program. Mm-hmm.
All right.
And Mr. Ricard, Mr. Rico, who is our person at the district level, he's involved with this project as well. So I'm hoping that I don't remember us in that exploratory group talking about a letter from Dr. Narcisse, but I think that's a step in the right direction.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Harrison. We will go ahead and do our BRAYN announcements so that we can stay on time and make time for Melanie. But like I said, if you want to put your questions in the chat, we also had discussions in the BRAYN coffee shop. So I will look at that document as well and see if there are questions. I know I heard early on that people are looking for resources. And so hopefully Cheruba will be able to help with that. Our BRAYN announcements today are as follows. Our next convening is in person. It is March 17th from 10 a.m. until 11:30 at the Goodwood Library. If you are not receiving the invites or the newsletter, please let me know. I'm sending information to 284 people at this point, so it's hard for me to see like who's not on the list or if it's bouncing back. So if you will send me a quick email, that would be great. The membership working group will certify organizations at the beginning of March. Remember to express your intent to be a BRAYN certified school partner if you would like to work with youth, or a BRAYN certified resource partner if you don't work directly with the youth, but still want to partner with EBR. I'm sorry, yeah, if you don't work directly with the youth, but offer resources and you still want to have a partnership with EBR. The instructions and the LOI template were provided in the newsletter, but I will link it in the recap for this meeting as well. As a member benefit, BRAYN wants to promote your organization at community events. We know that you are stretched thin and you're at capacity and can't be at every event. BRAYN's going to be there and wants to promote for you. Friday, February 24th at noon is the last day to drop off promotional swag and fill out, and flyers for the 225 Fest event. If you would like to volunteer at the BRAYN table, you'll be with me. And if you will fill out this volunteer form that Forrest is dropping in the chat, that will let us know, and I will get more information to you. As part of your commitment to BRAYN, your organization agrees to work in a working group. Please sign up for a working group today. That link will be added into the recap. If you need assistance or have questions about the working groups, whether it's about the time commitment or anything else, please email me at Jasmine, JASMIN, @ourbrayn.org. And Forrest will drop that in the chat. Again, if you're not receiving the newsletter or other communications, email me so that I can ensure that I have the correct email address on file. In addition to your information page powered by Harmonize, we promote your events and programs in the BRAYN newsletter. So it's important that I have the right email address for you. The newsletter is sent out bi-weekly, and members in good standing should send their submissions for their events to admin@ourbrayn for placement. Submissions received from members in good standing are placed in the newsletter on a first come, first served basis. As we continue to strengthen our capacity, a deadline to submit will be shared. The membership working group is eager to have the input of our members. Please take a moment to fill out the membership engagement survey and let us know how we're doing. And that was just dropped in the chat. And Melanie, I will turn it over to you. Melanie Henderson, she is the Director of Community Engagement at Capital Area United Way, and she wants to share with us about 225 Gives.
So hi, everyone. I just wanted to take a moment and talk to you about 225 Gives and what's coming up, give you a little bit background information. So 225 Gives is our Capital Region's Community Giving Day. And a giving day is a 24-hour fundraising event, typically online. And it's really to, raise awareness about different nonprofits and really boost engagement, donations. And typically these are launched by different community foundations, United Ways, or schools. So participating and being able to host a giving day in the area, we really do have the power to transform our community through this. And this will be our third year hosting 225 Gives. So right whenever the pandemic hit, we know that nonprofits were suffering. They weren't able to host their fundraisers. So different community leaders came together from Baton Rouge Area Foundation and the Wilson Foundation and United Way, and 225 Gives was born. We really wanted to help these nonprofits recover so they could continue pursuing their respective missions. And over the past 2 years, we've raised $5 million for over 200 nonprofits. And additionally to the nonprofits that are out there fundraising, we also have different sponsors for the event. And so these sponsors offer a way to maximize your donations for the day. So this is cash prizes for different unique donors, most donors during an hour. So that all goes into a pool, and you're able to, like I said, receive eligible cash and prizes to really maximize what you do for the day. In order to participate in 225 Gives, you need to be a 501c3 in good standing with the Secretary of State. You also need to be able to provide your IRS determination letter and your most recent 990. Participating nonprofits also have to be in the 225 region. So the parishes where your services need to be, delivered or have to be in these parishes. There's a lot of people who, I've heard feedback that they have big fundraisers coming up in June or May. And so how do you balance that? Is it worth participating? And I believe, yes, absolutely. This is something that you should do. You don't want to leave money on the table. Participating in something like 225 Gives, it helps you raise additional funds, increases your visibility. You can add new donors. You can enhance your donor data. You can recruit for more volunteers. So if you do find yourself having those competing needs, is it something that you want to incorporate your 225 goal around your big fundraiser in additional way to support? Or does your organization need something that is so very specific, you can build a goal around that outside of that fundraiser? So there's different ways you can strategize to determine what the fundraising goal should be for you. Participating in 225 Gives also gives you access to the public relations that United Way provides. So that includes print, radio, event promotion. I'm doing these type of speaking engagements all over. So we are definitely getting the word out there, getting donors excited, encouraging them to go visit the 225 Gives page and review the nonprofits. So we're able to leverage our partnerships for you. And also you will receive a toolkit with best practices, different templates, graphics to, if it's an email campaign, a social media campaign, we are giving you this toolkit that you can then take and even replicate that into your own overall fundraising strategy. And the next slide is just an example of some of the graphics that we created this year. So the one on top, it's an email. You can put that in your email signature and it goes directly to our site. We also have different ones online, but this was just a little sample. So like I said, we do different speaking engagements. We're doing training opportunities. All trainings are online. So if you sign up now, you have access to go back, but that is goal setting, walking you through a communications plan and a communications schedule. Next month, we're going to talk about peer-to-peer fundraising and how to use the assets and resources we give you, how to really use that for your day of campaign. You can move. So in order to register, you register online, 225gives.org. Right now, we are running a special. So we kicked it off on Valentine's Day. We wanted to show love to our community. So we're offering 25% off a registration at the end of the month. So that is $75 would be the registration fee. If you are a participating nonprofit, I see a few of you are, you still have time to refer a friend, and you will get put into a raffle for $225. So like I said, completely new, you have that 25% off registration. And if you are registered, you can refer to get in that raffle. But I also want y'all to be aware that we are not the only Give Day in the state. There's 3 other ones for Central Louisiana, the Northern Louisiana, and then the Greater New Orleans Foundation. So if you have colleagues or just other community partners that fall into these regions, please let them know that they can participate in these Give Days. And we all are doing it like May 4th and 5th. You can follow us on all our social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We post we'll do sponsorships, we'll do nonprofit highlights. So definitely make sure you're following that. And then that's my information. Please reach out if you have any questions. I'm happy to do technical one-on-one assistance. I have people who've been sitting through the trainings, and then they go back, talk with their team, and we're able to come back, and it's really helped them. It's also helping me learn to kind of see how their strategy might work best for someone else as well. So please take down my information and reach out. We would love to get you registered. We would love for you to help us promote that 225 Gives is coming up May 4th. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but I know we're kind of running low on time, but I'm definitely easily accessible.
Yeah, we'll take this last 6 minutes to make additional community announcements. And also, if you have questions, this is the time for that. So if you just raise your hand so we can, make sure your question is answered. Any community announcements? Okay. Oh, Bethany has a question.
I don't have a question. I was just,
Oh.
I have an announcement. Young Entrepreneurs Academy on March 8th is having our community pitch, which is sponsored by Community Coffee. We have 19 businesses started by middle school and high school students that will be pitching for a share of $25,000 in seed funding. So we would love to have you all there. And if there are any students who fit in that category who you might think should come and see this event, please, by all means, bring them. It'll be at the Patrick F. Taylor Hall at 5 p.m. on March 8th. I've sent Jasmine to the admin the registration link. We would love to have as many after-school partners there to learn more about what we do, to have them apply for our season next year. So thank you all so much.
Thanks, Bethany. That's going to be really cool. Any other announcements or any questions?
I'm sorry, I couldn't
No,
find
go
the right
ahead,
thing.
Eric.
So I'm sorry. So Baton Rouge STEM has 2 events coming up. We'll be participating in the Louisiana Leadership Health Expo, which is coming up on March 11th at the Louisiana Leadership Institute. So we'll have a pretty cool demonstration connecting chemistry to pharmacy for kids. So you can actually, I just posted it on our Facebook page. You can register your kids there. And then on the 18th of March, that next Saturday, we'll be wrapping up our community STEM days in the city of Baker. So it'll be our final STEM Saturday in Baker. We're making it a huge event. The mayor of Baker should be there, and then we'll be recognizing the kids who participated in the programming in Baker as well. So if you want to expose your kids to chemistry, this will be a great opportunity on Saturday, March 18th.
On February 25th at LASM, we're having Love Your Heart Day. And so we're celebrating the art and science of our hearts. So we'll have some community partners there to share. And also at 12:30, the hip hop doc will be in our atrium for a DJ dance party. And Mayor Broom will be joining us at that time. She'll be speaking to the audience, and we're hoping to see a few of Mayor Broom's dance moves. So y'all feel free to come visit us.
Oh, that sounds fun.
What's the date again?
It's
date?
February 25th, and it's from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. If you go on our website, it'll give you a list of activities throughout the day. Prime time, I would say, is about 10 to 2. But also, you know, there's yoga in the art studio. There's all kinds of fun stuff. So yeah, from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. on February 25th.
All right, and if you Nita, yours is soon, so I can put that in the recap if you email it to me.
Okay, yeah.
Eric, yours is in March, so if you email it to either my email address or admin, preferably my email address. If you email that information to me, I can get it in the newsletter.
Okay.
And Bethany, when was yours? Oh, no, you emailed me already. Never mind. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Are there any other announcements or any questions? All right. Well, I just want to say thank you all for being here, and we will hopefully see you next month at the library from 10 until 11:30. Melanie, thank you so much for being here, and congratulations already. I'm speaking it into existence. It's going to be a great
Thank
event.
you.
All right. Well,
We're
y'all have a
excited.
great holiday. Hopefully you get some rest.